On today's episode of The Franchise, today is Wednesday, January 11th, 2023. And in this episode, we're going to go over the Arizona Cardinals likely to trade star wide receiver Deandre Hopkins this offseason, as well as the Chicago Bears. They hold the rights to the number one overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. Will they stay put? Will they draft someone? Will they trade the pick? Will they trade their star young quarterback, Justin Fields? Go through some scenarios with the Bears and that pick for them. I'm going to give my NBA All-Star starters. The NBA All-Star game is in a few weeks. I'm going to give my 5 starters for each conference for the All-Star game, and then we'll end it off with, we also have the NBA MVP race. There's 6 guys in contention for the MVP award in the NBA, and then we'll end it off with the top 10 catchers in Major League Baseball. Before we get into it, as always, the franchise is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. The Instagram and TikTok are in the description of the episode. Make sure to go follow, like on those accounts and those videos uploaded on those platforms. Beginning with DeAndre Hopkins and the Arizona Cardinals. Reports are that DeAndre Hopkins more than likely will be traded this offseason. The Cardinals fired their head coach, Cliff Kingsbury, and also their general manager left the organization. They went 4-13 last season. That was enough for last in the NFC West. Kyler Murray got injured at one point during the season towards ACL. He will be out at least into some of the start of next season. And the Cardinals, very disappointing year for them. Made the playoffs a season ago. This year, only 4 wins. Their offense was horrible. Defensively, they weren't good either. I mean, just looking at some stats here, Arizona allowed 52 touchdowns on the year. They only scored 37, allowing 26 points per game, only putting up 20 points per game. None of this was the fault of DeAndre Hopkins, who is the subject to these trade rumors. He only was able to play. This season, he only played in 9 games due to a suspension for PEDs that saw him being out for the first 8 games of the season. But in the 9 games that he played, 717 yards and 3 touchdowns, 64 receptions. Hopkins has always been one of the best receivers in the NFL since he broke in with the Houston Texans. I mean, he's put up multiple 1,000-yard seasons. He led the league in touchdowns once with 13. He's always a deep ball threat, one of the best route runners, one of the best hands and footwork in the NFL at the receiver position. He's entering his age 31 season, has 2 years left on his deal, and he's most likely seeking a long-term extension with only 2 years left on his contract. In Arizona, looking like they're going in a direction, not of a rebuild, because they have signed Kyler Murray to a long-term extension. More than likely, they'll be trying to build around him with some younger pieces. When Arizona got DeAndre Hopkins, first of all, they fleeced the Houston Texans a few years ago when they made the trade for Hopkins. They only gave up a second-round pick and David Johnson for one of, at the time, probably the best receiver in the NFL. Gave up a second-round pick. Arizona most likely won't be getting anything better than a second-round pick when they trade him this year. You just look at some guys in recent years. Amari Cooper last year got traded for a 5th-round pick from Cleveland. Odell Beckham, I mean, he was released. Tyreek Hill obviously got traded for a 1st-round pick, but Tyreek Hill, I mean, the level between Tyreek Hill and DeAndre Hopkins, I'd say, is pretty significant. DeAndre Hopkins, though, is still one of the better receivers in the NFL. You could definitely make the argument for him being a top 10, top 15 wide receiver. So what teams could he be traded to? What teams should be interested in DeAndre Hopkins this offseason? I think there's a case for every single team to go out there and get this guy. It's obviously not possible. But a few teams that do stick out, I'd say the Green Bay Packers. If Aaron Rodgers decides to commit to another season with the Packers, I think Green Bay needs to go out there and get themselves a true number 1 receiver to put alongside Aaron Rodgers. You look, since Devontae Adams left, I mean, this past season, The Packers didn't make the playoffs. They had a lot of trouble, definitely in the beginning of the season, with the receivers catching balls, running right routes, just scoring and putting points on the board. Christian Watson emerged throughout the year as a legit wide receiver. But if you can make Christian Watson your wide receiver 2 and add a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, a veteran wide receiver who's one of the best in the league, it's not only going to help Christian Watson's development, it's going to help the team out as well and really have an offensive weapon for the Packers, because they have a lot of nice pieces on offense. They have Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon in the backfield. If Aaron Rodgers does return at quarterback, he's still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And then you pair DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Watson on the outside, and suddenly Green Bay has emerged once again as a legit contender in that NFC North. So I'd say the Packers are definitely a team that needs to go out there and get DeAndre Hopkins. I can see the New York Giants going out there and getting him. They really do not have a true receiver. Their offense is ran through Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, and adding a receiver like DeAndre Hopkins would definitely help out their offense. I could see a team like maybe the Jets going out there, but they have more issues than wide receiver. They need to figure out their quarterback situation. The Jacksonville Jaguars most definitely could do that. They will have Calvin Ridley potentially coming back, but if you don't have Ridley coming back, you can add him, DeAndre Hopkins, to the Christian Kirk wide receiver room in Jacksonville. You can see the Dallas Cowboys with CeeDee Lamb. Adding DeAndre Hopkins and Michael Gallup would be a very, very nice fit in Dallas. And then the Chicago Bears, a team that has the most cap space in the NFL, and needing to put talent around Justin Fields. There's many other destinations for Hopkins as well. We'll see, where he ends up going. He will definitely be traded. I don't think Arizona is going to keep him, especially with a new GM, a new head coach coming in, probably not wanting to pay a 31-year-old wide receiver top dollar money, which is what he's going to demand out there in his next contract. He's going to demand some of the highest paid money in the NFL, and that is rightfully deserved. He's one of the best receivers in the game. But moving on, we just mentioned the Chicago Bears. The Bears had the worst record in the league last year. They'll have the most cap space this offseason, but they also hold the rights to the number 1 overall pick. Majority of the season, the Houston Texans had that number 1 overall pick, but the Texans decided to win their last game, and the Bears rode out with the tank. So they'll have the number 1 overall pick in a draft class that has 2 top quarterback prospects. People will say there's 3 or 4. I really think there's only 2 quarterback prospects in this draft right at the top in the first round that are legit quarterback prospects, and that's CJ Stroud and Bryce Young from Alabama and Ohio State. The thing for the Bears is I don't think they're going to need to draft a quarterback. Justin Fields emerged this season as a guy who can be a franchise quarterback. His rookie season didn't play good, and there's definitely questions about him potentially being a franchise quarterback. But you look at the stats he put up this past season: 17 touchdowns, 11 picks, 2,000 yards passing. But he's also a dual threat quarterback. He rushed for the most rushing yards in the NFL out of the quarterback position, 1,143 yards rushing, with 8 touchdowns rushing as well. Justin Fields, I think, has proven that he can be the future quarterback for the Bears. They just need to put pieces around him. They need an offensive line. They have one of the worst offensive lines in the league. Fields gets sacked and has to run and scramble every single snap. And then they don't have any receivers. They tried to get Chase Claypool to do something. He didn't do anything for them this season. So, I don't think they need to address the quarterback situation, and they do hold the number 1 overall pick. So they could draft a defensive player. They could go draft Will Anderson from Alabama or Jalen Carter from Georgia. But I think it makes more sense for the Bears to go and trade down. Trade the number 1 overall pick to one of these teams that's going to need a quarterback. Because if we just go through and we look here at what teams will need a quarterback, Houston has the number 2 overall pick. they will draft a quarterback. They will either draft Bryce Young or CJ Stroud at that number 2 spot. So they'll need a quarterback. The Colts need a QB. The Rams, maybe, but Stafford will be coming back. Mayfield might return. But for sure, we have the Texans and the Colts. The Falcons, maybe. The Saints, I'd say they could use a quarterback. The Panthers could use a quarterback. The Titans, the Jets, the Patriots, if they don't like Mac Jones. The Buccaneers, when Tom Brady either retires or leaves in the offseason. Washington might have their quarterback and Sam Howell on the team. Detroit, I think they should stay put with Jared Goff. And then you could look at some other teams like towards the top. I mean, the Raiders, they definitely, I don't think Jarrett Stidham's the answer, and Derek Carr's on his way out. So there's a lot of teams that are going to need quarterbacks. And if you're the Bears, you can trade with any of these teams. I think the Colts are a team to look out for to make the jump to the number 1 overall pick in draft, either a Stroud or a Young. And the Bears could trade down, and they'll get the number 4 pick, and definitely some other pieces. And then you could draft some of the other, you could draft a top receiver. You could draft some offensive linemen to really build around Justin Fields, because the Bears also have the most cap space in the league. So we'll see what they do in free agency. If they address the defense, some weapons around Fields, the offensive line, because whatever they don't address in free agency, they're going to have to address in the draft. And with having the number 1 overall pick, the Bears have the most leverage in the NFL. And then there's also the conversation, which was brought up by some former GMs on ESPN, saying that the Bears should stay put at number 1, draft Bryce Young, and trade Justin Fields for first-round picks to one of those quarterback-needy teams. That is a possibility. You know, it is definitely in the realm of possibility to draft a Stroud or Young at number 1 if you're Chicago, and then trade Justin Fields. Because Fields, as good as he was, do you think he can develop into a passer? You have to ask yourself that question. Can he develop into an NFL quarterback that can throw the ball when it matters most? Can he be a guy that throws for 3,000, 4,000 yards in a season? I think if you put, a good offensive line and some receivers around him, I think he can. But you also have a chance to, have a few more years under a rookie contract with a Young or a Stroud. Both of those guys are going to be insanely good quarterbacks in the NFL, in my opinion. I think they both possess the talent needed to be great quarterbacks in the league. So the Bears, they have a lot of options. Trade number 1, keep number 1, draft a quarterback, draft a defensive player, draft a piece for Justin Fields on the offensive side of the ball. The NBA All-Star Game, that's going to be in a few weeks. I don't know where it is this year because, frankly, the NBA All-Star Game's horrible. It's not fun to watch. But in terms of players having All-Star nods to their name and their career accolades, it is definitely important. So we'll start with the All-Star starters. I know the NBA doesn't do the West and Eastern Conference teams anymore. They do the team captains, but they still separate the voting into West and Eastern Conference. So I'm going to give my 5 starters in each conference. The NBA also, what I don't like with their all-star voting is they make it 2 guards and 3 front court players. Instead of just having the 5 best players in each conference starting, you have to have 2 guards and 3 forwards in a game where the NBA is kind of positionless now. But starting out west with guard number 1, the point guard, the first guard in the Western Conference starters for me is Luka Doncic. He is a MVP candidate. He's one of the best. He's probably a top 3, top 5 player in the game. This season, putting up 34 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, shooting 50% from the field, putting up amazing performances for a Dallas team that has nothing around him. Luka easily deserves a spot as an all-star starter. Number 2, the second guard, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from the Thunder. This guy's putting up 30 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, shooting 91% from the free throw line, 50% from the field, 34% from 3. Shai is on a bad OKC Thunder team, so there's definitely going to be a conversation of empty stats. But Shea putting up 30 points, I don't think 30 points is empty stats on a bad team. Shea has all of the abilities to be a very, very, very good player on a championship team. And this season, I mean, he's playing amazing this season. He deserves to be an all-star starter. You could make the argument for Ja Morant, who's putting up 27 points on a Grizzlies team that is a championship contender. But I think Shea deserves the starting job over a guy like Ja Morant, Steph Curry, or Damian Lillard. And then for the 3 forwards, I have LeBron, 29 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. Still doing this at the age of 38 years old. Even though the Lakers aren't one of the best teams, they're not a great team so far this season, LeBron is still doing it at a very, very old age that we frankly have never seen before, this longevity that LeBron has had. My other 2 forwards, I have Nikola Jokic, back-to-back MVP. He's in the MVP race again. He has the potential chance to win 3 straight MVPs. This season, putting up 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists, almost averaging a triple-double. The best passing big man in the league. One of the best offensive threats at the center position in the league. Just overall, one of the best players in the NBA. And then I also have Zion Williamson starting. Anthony Davis, I think, would be a starter, but he's only played 25 games. He's missed a lot of time with injury. So with that, I don't think AD deserves a spot to start just based on the time he's missed. I think Zion with the Pelicans, who are a very, very good team, 26 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, and a block for Zion, shooting 60% from field. Zion is living up to all of the hype, and the Pelicans are playing, very, very good basketball as well. So those are my 5 Western Conference starters: Luka, Shea, LeBron, Zion, and Nikola Jokic. Out East, I think there's more deep in the Eastern Conference in terms of the starters, of guys you could put in starters. I think the list is longer. At my 2 guard spot, the first guard spot, I have Donovan Mitchell from the Cavs, putting up 29 points, 3 rebounds, and 4 assists, shooting 40% from the 3-point range. He just dropped a 71 point game a few nights ago for the Cavs, leading a Cleveland team that was a play-in team last year to one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference, along with Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. Donovan Mitchell is really one of the best players in the game. He's personally one of my 3 favorite players in the game right now, and he deserves to be a starter in the Eastern Conference for the All-Star game this year. My second is Kyrie Irving. Kyrie, very polarizing figure. It's surprising, based off of earlier in the season, being suspended, missing time, all of the distractions that Kyrie brought earlier in the year, we haven't heard a word about Kyrie off the court. And he's just balling. 26 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists, 36% from 3. And Brooklyn's one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the Eastern Conference, if not in the entire NBA. And he's a big, big part of that. He deserves to start as well. And then the forward spot, only 3 forward spots, this is why I mentioned earlier that the position-based voting for the All-Star starters is kind of stupid, because I think there's 4 guys that deserve to start at the forward position, but only 3 of them can. And these 4 people are all MVP candidates. So one of these MVP guys is going to have to come off of the bench in the All-Star game. The first one that will be starting for me is Giannis. He's the best player in the game of basketball. He's the best player in the world. 31 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists for a Milwaukee Bucks team that is one of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference and a championship contender. Giannis is the most dominant force in the paint in the league right now. And not just on the offensive side. On the defensive side, he's a Defensive Player of the Year candidate year in and year out. So he's a starter. Kevin Durant is a starter. Probably one of the best offensive scorers in the league right now. You can say that for a lot of guys, but he has an amazing, amazing offensive game. 29 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists, 37% from 3. Kevin Durant, along with Kyrie Irving, is leading a Brooklyn Nets team to where we actually thought they would be for once. They've played in Brooklyn for so long, and they've never been a dominant regular season team. They've never even been a good team in the regular season or the postseason. And so far, Brooklyn this season, after firing Steve Nash and having a lot of distractions early on, and the trade request from KD in the offseason, Brooklyn's turned their entire season around. And Kevin Durant is a huge part of that, obviously. I mean, he is a top 3 player in the game. No doubt about it. And then finally, at that last forward spot is Joel Embiid. 33 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists. He is in the running for an MVP. Philadelphia, he's leading Philadelphia to one of the better records in the Eastern Conference. And then the one snub, the guy who should be starting but I don't think will, is Jason Tatum. I think he's going to be in the MVP race. 30 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists for a Boston Celtics team that is top 3 in the Eastern Conference at the point of recording this video. I mean, Jason Tatum is an all-world talent. He is a top 10 player. The Celtics have the best record in the Eastern Conference at 29-12, best record in all of basketball. They have one of the highest point differentials in the sport. They are putting up 118 points per game, and Jason Tatum's a huge part of that, right? Jason Tatum deserves to start, but with Giannis, KD, and Embiid, one of those guys has to not start between those 4, and I think it will be Jason Tatum. So those are my Eastern and Western Conference All-Star starters. We'll see when they actually get announced what kind of BS is pulled, what guy shouldn't be starting that ends up starting in the All-Star game when those get announced. Real quick, NBA MVP race. I think there's 6 guys in contention for the MVP. I think Nikola Jokic, Luka, Giannis, KD, Tatum, and Embiid are all guys that could win the MVP. Jokic has won back-to-back, so going into the year, you would think that there's no way he wins the third one, but he is kind of leading all of the mid-season MVP leaderboards. So it wouldn't surprise me if he wins 3 straight. He's the best center in the game. He's a top 5 player in the game. Nikola Jokic is amazing. Luka, I think, is a guy that deserves an MVP, especially if he can bring Dallas to the playoffs, and then we'll see how deep they can go. They're in 4th in the Western Conference right now with just Luka. Luka is the entire Dallas Mavericks team. Giannis, like I said earlier, is one of the best players in the game. I think he is the best player in the game. KD, also one of the best players in the game. I'm going to have to do these top players at some point because there's just so many guys in the game that you could say, oh, they're top 3, and then there's like 10 guys that are top 3 players in the game. So I'll have to do a top 25 NBA players at some point, but that is my NBA MVP race. If I was to put this in order, I think Nikola Jokic is the favorite to win MVP, followed by Luka, then KD, Giannis, Tatum, and Embiid. All of those guys. Usually, this is a sign that the NBA is changing, because a few years ago, at this point in the season, there'd be a 2 or 3 person race for the MVP. But I think there's legit 6 guys that could win the MVP. I think all 6 of these guys that I mentioned have the opportunity to win the MVP at the end of the season. Finally, transitioning over to Major League Baseball. We're 40-something days away from the start of, I think it's spring training. So we got to get all of this baseball preseason content out. We got to do top 10 players at each position. And then after all of that, we'll do the top 50 or top 100 players in the game. And then after that, we'll go through each division and give standings, predictions, offseason recaps for each team. But we have to start with the top 10 players at each position. And we're going to start with the catcher position. We're going to work our way around the diamond. Next episode, we'll do first baseman. And then on Friday, we'll do second baseman. But today we have the top 10 catchers in the game of baseball. I'm basing this off of, there's many ways to base these top 10 kind of lists. You can base it off of just last season. You could base it off of the last 2 or 3 years, and then projections for the next season. I'm doing it based off of this year, or the 2022-2021 season. And then, I'm not really projecting where I think they'll be next season or this upcoming 2023. just because there's really no way, we can't predict what they'll do. We can have expectations, but I'm not going to base where I think they'll be into these rankings. These are top 10 catchers heading into the season. After the season is a different conversation. Heading into the season, my top 10 catchers beginning at number 10, Travis d'Arnaud, catcher for the Atlanta Braves. Taking a look at his numbers from last year, 18 home runs, 268 average, 319 on base, 472 slugging, 791 OPS for Travis d'Arnaud. He has the problem with d'Arnaud is going to be his defense as well as he has a very, very, very high chase rate. He's in the 13th percentile in chase rate, which is not good. He's very, very low walk rate. He has a nice max exit velocity, and he's a very solid framer, at the catcher position. However, he's 33, heading into his 34-year-old age season, and the Atlanta Braves just got another guy to play catcher who will be on this list in a little bit. So I'd expect Travis d'Arnaud next season to drop off, but based off of his past 2 seasons, I mean, you look at what he did in 2021, he was very, very productive for Atlanta as well. So he's number 10. Number 9 is Danny Jansen of the Toronto Blue Jays, 15 home runs, 260 average, 339 on base percentage, 516 slugging, 855 OPS. This is the second catcher on this list that has a teammate ahead of him. So there's 2 teams in this top 10 list at the catcher position that have 2 top 10 catchers, which is very, very good to have. I mean, how often is it that you have a top 10 catcher, let alone 2, in a position that's generally not that strong? Danny Jansen's a offensive catcher. Defensively, he's not good. He ranks 37th percentile in terms of framing. His pop time is very bad. So defensively, he's not a good catcher, but offensively, he is a very, very solid catcher offensively. I mean, an 855 OPS at a catcher position, that's pretty solid. At number 8, I have Jose Trevino from the Yankees, 11 bombs, 248, 283 on base percentage, 388 slugging, with a 671 OPS plus for the Yankees last year. He was an all-star for the Yankees. He kind of blossomed out of nowhere. They traded and got rid of Gary Sanchez in the last offseason, and then Trevino kind of had to fill in the catching position void. For the Yankees, he's a solid defender and a pretty solid offensive hitter as well. I just think, he's not just a solid defensive catcher. He's probably the best framer in baseball. He doesn't strike out a lot. He doesn't walk a lot, but he also doesn't swing and miss a lot either. He's in the 100th percentile in terms of frame rate, so he is going to help out the Yankees pitching staff. And as a catcher, that is your job. Your job is to get your pitcher strikes, limit runs, limit base running activity, and he's allowing his pitchers to get more strikes. That is elite frame rate for Jose Trevino and some pretty solid offensive numbers as well. Number 7, I have Tyler Stevenson from the Cincinnati Reds. He is an offensive-only catcher. Defensively, he's very low in frame rate and in pop time. But offensively, last year with 6 home runs, nothing crazy. But this guy can hit, and he can hit for average. 320 average, 372 on base, 482 slugging with an 854 OPS for Tyler Stevenson. If he can just become a solid or below average defender at the catcher position, he will have the potential and the opportunity to jump up this list as one of the best catchers in the game because the offense is so good. But with having very, very lackluster and I guess bad defense at that catcher's position, that is definitely where it hurts him in terms of his ranking. But he's still a very, very good catcher just based off his offense. His offense is carrying him, and his offense is amazing. A catcher that hits for average and gets on base at a near 400 clip is incredible. Number 6, I have Alejandro Kirk of the Toronto Blue Jays. He's the second Blue Jays catcher to be in the top 10. Toronto, this offseason, had 3 catchers that could legitimately start. They have one of their top prospects, Gabriel Moreno, one of the top prospects in baseball as a catcher. They had to end up flipping him because, you can't just have 3 amazing catchers. But for the Blue Jays, Kirk last season was an all-star, 14 home runs, 285 average, 372 on base, 415 slugging, 786 OPS for Alejandro Kirk. This guy is the perfect catcher for the Blue Jays at this moment. He's only 24. And just looking at some advanced statistics here, he walks a lot. He doesn't strike out a lot. He doesn't chase a lot. He doesn't whiff a lot. And his framing is among the elite in the game of baseball. 94th percentile in terms of frame rate. He's in the 88th and 98th percentile in strikeout and walk rate. And like I said, he doesn't whiff and he doesn't chase at pitches. He is a very, very good hitter. He can hit for power. And he's a great defender. For a Blue Jays team that's looking to compete next season, having him behind the plate, helping out that pitching staff, I think is exactly what they need. And him only being 24 years old, I think there's potential with a great season ahead of him that we could see him jump up even higher in this list at the end of the 2023 season. Entering the top 5 is Wilson Contreras, formerly of the Cubs, now of the St. Louis Cardinals, replacing Yadier Molina. Last year, 22 home runs, 243 average, 349 on base, 466 slugging with an 815 OPS. Contreras going to be replacing Yadier Molina. Very hard thing to do. Yadi is one of the greatest catchers in the game, Hall of Fame catcher. But Wilson Contreras, with his time in Chicago, he's 30 years old. He's an offensive catcher. Same thing with Tyler Stevenson. Wilson Contreras is not going to be one of the best. He's not going to help you out. He's not going to help out your pitching staff in terms of getting strikes with his frame rate being 25 percentile. He has a good pop time, pretty solid pop time to second base. But offensively, he is a monster. He's 90th percentile in hard hit percentage, 98th in max exit velocity, and then with his xWOBA, 94th percentile. And then, like I mentioned, he's a guy that can hit 20 plus home runs each season at the catcher position, which is not a common thing to come by in Major League Baseball. He's number 5. Number 4, Will Smith of the LA Dodgers. Last season, he had an amazing year for the Dodgers. 24 home runs, 260 average, 343 on base, 465 slugging with an 807 on base percentage for Will Smith. He's really their only catcher on their roster. I know they have a very high level prospect in their system, but Will Smith last season, like I said, very good. Just trying to pull up his advanced metrics real quick. But Baseball Savant is being very slow, which is not what I want to see. Will Smith, 27 years old. Like I said, the Dodgers they've had a lot of top-level prospects at the catcher position come through their system. But Will Smith looks to be the catcher for at least the next few years. Frame rate is about as average as it gets. He's pretty mid in terms of as a defensive catcher. Pretty solid pop time to second base. But offensively, he's an offensive threat. He can hit for power. He can hit for somewhat of an average. He doesn't chase a lot. And he doesn't strike out particularly a lot, but he doesn't strike out too much either. He's at the 79th percentile in terms of strikeouts. Number 3, so he's number 4. Will Smith is at number 4. Number 3 for me in my top 10 catchers is going to be Sean Murphy of the Atlanta Braves, formerly of the Oakland A's. The Braves go out there and they get a Gold Glove catcher, one of the best defenders at the catcher position in the game. Sean Murphy, last year 18 homers, 250 average, 332 on base, 426 slugging, with a 759 OPS. for the Oakland A's. Goes down to the Atlanta Braves, where they have an amazing young pitching staff. And to add a guy who is in the 96th percentile in terms of pop time to second base, 84th percentile in framing. I mean, he is really going to help out the Atlanta Braves pitching staff and defensively. Sean Murphy, Gold Glove catcher last season for the A's. And then you're adding him, and he had a very solid year at the plate last season. If he can continue to do that for the next 5, 6, 7 years, the Atlanta Braves are going to not only just have they found their catcher of the future, they'll be very, 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 very good. Top 2 catchers in baseball. This guy I'm about to mention, number 2, there's argument for him to be number 1. However, I just don't think he's played enough big league games. Number 2 is Adley Rutschman of the Baltimore Orioles, former number 1 overall pick, and he had a great year. He is going to be the best catcher in the game. I'd expect it to be by the end of the season. But heading into the year, only having 1 year under your belt, I think I just need to see it a little more. I think midway through the season, we will be able to crown Adley Rutschman as the future and as the best catcher in the game. Last season, Orioles rookie year, 13 home runs, 254 average, 362 on base, 445 slugging, and 806 OPS. He's a great hitter from both sides of the plate. He's a switch hitter, walks a lot, doesn't strike out a lot, and then he's probably the best defensive catcher. One of the best defensive catchers in the game. 84 percentile in frame rate. He has a great pop time to second base. He's blocking a lot of balls, not letting a lot of wild pitches and pass balls get to him. And just to be able to do what he does offensively from both sides of the plate, I think this is a guy in a few years that could hit 20 home runs and be a near 300 hitter at the catcher position from both sides of the plate as well. But number 1 catcher in baseball heading into the year, I'm going to have JT Realmuto from the Philadelphia Phillies. I think he's been the best catcher in the game for the past 3, 4, maybe even 5 years, back when he was a member of the Marlins. Last year, 22 home runs, 276 average, 342 on base, 478 slugging with an 820 OPS. I mean, he's just done it for so many years, so consistently. I'm pretty sure, according to like some metrics, he's the fastest catcher in terms of, on the bases. He's one of the best hitting catchers in the game. He has the best, fastest pop time to second base, so he's going to throw out runners. He's going to frame pretty solid as well. So JT Realmuto, he's the number 1 catcher in the game of baseball. I'd expect that, though, to change. I think Adley Rutschman has the potential to jump him at some point in the season. But like I said, these are heading into the year where I'm not projecting anyone. If I was projecting, I'd have Rutschman and I'd have all of the younger guys ahead of some of the older guys like Realmuto and like Darno, and some of the guys that are like Wilson Contreras too, that are a little bit older. But based off of the past 2 years and just based off of, especially what they did last year, those are my top 10 catchers. We'll go through next episode. Tomorrow will be first baseman. Friday will be second baseman. And then next week we'll continue it off, going around the diamond, top 10 in each position. So, yeah, those are the top 10 catchers. Go through it one more time. Number 10, Travis d'Arnaud. Number 9, Danny Jansen. Number 8, Jose Trevino. Number 7, Tyler Stevenson. 6, Alejandro Kirk. 5, Wilson Contreras. 4, Will Smith. 3, Sean Murphy. 2, Adley Rutschman. And then number 1, I have JT Realmuto. So that's going to do it for this episode of The Franchise on Wednesday, January 11th. We'll be back on Thursday with another episode as we inch closer to the start of the NFL playoffs. We'll talk more baseball, we'll talk some basketball, and we will be back with another episode tomorrow. But like I mentioned earlier, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, franchises available on all those platforms. TikTok, Instagram, linked in the description of the episode, whether you're listening or watching. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys tomorrow with another episode.